Hello everyone, it's Theme Park Avenue, I'm Eric. Busch Gardens Tampa is my home park. I love it very much, I've been many times. I've been on every ride there, many times as well, so I know the park extremely well, back of my hand kind of thing. But I do not know the sister park, Busch Gardens Williamsburg, quite as well. While I've been to Tampa probably 100 times at this point, Busch Gardens Williamsburg I went to once in 2012. That all changed when I went twice. My second appearance there was in 2023, and it was an interesting experience. I went in wondering, how would it compete against Busch Gardens Tampa? A park I've been on every ride at, love all of them at, has Iron Gwazi, my favorite roller coaster of all time. And my only experience before this at Busch Gardens Williamsburg was Verbolten, Loch Ness Monster, and Grover's Alpine Express. Got a few other kiddie rides in there, but that's it. So at this point, very clearly, Busch Gardens Tampa wins. But my 2023 visit ended up being an awesome experience. And even as I say this right now, I'm kind of torn on which one is the better Busch Gardens park. So I'm going to go through my full experience, discuss what's great about the park, things that might hold it back, and in the end, try to determine which Busch Gardens park is supreme. Let's find out, but before we get any further in the review, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you know when new theme park content comes out, and with all that out of the way, let's begin. So, right off the bat, there was one unfortunate experience, and that was the closures of Griffon and Pantheon. They had not opened yet for the season, from my understanding. Griffon might have, but it was down the whole day. And Pantheon just had not. So I cannot judge those two roller coasters. Given that those are two seemingly higher tier rides, that is a little unfortunate. But there is still plenty to talk about, so let's go through the experience of driving up to the park. So driving along the highway, and then approaching the parking lot, you can see Apollo's Chariot along the boundary, and it is beautiful. And walking up to the entrance plaza, there's a great fountain and some other architecture. It is a very gorgeous way to start the day. It's worth noting that this park has been called the most beautiful park in the world by the Golden Ticket Awards, and right from this entrance experience, I'd say it pretty much lived up to that. More on that later. So you enter through the England area. The England area is pleasant, there's a Skyride depot. Unfortunately, the Skyride was closed. I don't know what the condition is, but if it's anything like Busch Gardens Tampa, we're probably never going to see that ride again. Once the park itself actually opened, my party first went to Festa Italia. This area, it has Pantheon, so we were thinking, yeah, we can get on it. And even if not, there were two rides that we knew for sure were open. The first ride we went on that day was Tempesto. And Tempesto is an interesting ride because it is a Premier Ride Skyrocket 2. I'd been on two of these prior. Superman at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom I thought was excellent. Definitely the gold standard of this ride model. And then there's Tigress at Busch Gardens Tampa, which I find painful and very oddly paced and not a very fun one to be on. Tempesto is a solid middle ground. It was definitely not as painful, not sure why the comfort collar just worked better, and the pacing seems stronger overall, compared to Tigress. So I think it leans a bit more toward Tigress than Superman Ultimate Flight because the comfort collar still is not the best restraint, but all in all, it is a decent ride to have at the park, and it was not a bad way to start the day. The next ride was Apollo's Chariot, and this is a ride I do love in a sense, but it's hard to deny that it is definitely the worst of the B&M hypers. Let me explain. So most B&M hypers have a lot of floater airtime. That's the big thing. You just get thrown out of your seat for a few seconds. Very fun. Love that sensation. Apollo's Chariot, being the oldest of these, doesn't quite have that as well as the more modern ones. It is a kind of minor thing, but when this is one of the biggest draws of this ride model, it does hold the experience back a bit. Fortunately, I still love the ride for 2 reasons. 1, the pacing. The mid-course brake run does not slow down the ride as much as I thought it might, and the first half you do have a very good sense of speed, especially because of the other thing I love, the location. You're going over the Rhine River, which is not the real Rhine River, but the one in the park, and you're going through a forest, and the scenery, just from this awesome roller coaster view, is gorgeous. It's one of the most beautiful ride settings, period. And that does elevate the ride quite a bit. So all in all, this is a very good roller coaster, but there are things about it that I wish could be changed, but obviously I understand why it wasn't quite ready, since this was the first ride of this model. Still, a good start to the day with these 2 roller coasters. Because part of the park was kind of closed off, we had to walk back to the England area in order to get to other rides. The next ride we went on was Loch Ness Monster. And this is one I had been on previously, and all in all, while it is a good aerodynamics roller coaster, it's very far from one of the best, so I think it might be a little overrated. It's quite janky all in all. The loops are very fun. I think the interlocking loop is a cool gimmick, and the loops themselves have very strong forces. My favorite part, honestly, is the tunnel, because the tunnel feels very small, invokes a bit of claustrophobia in a good way, and you build up quite a bit of speed. The ride has another great setting, like most rides in this park do, but it is a little weirdly paced and jankier than some other aero rides. In my opinion, the best aero looper in Virginia is Anaconda at King's Dominion, but then again, no one else likes that ride, so what do I know? The next thing to discuss in the park, this was something that I kinda knew about, but still loved more than maybe even some of the best rides in the park. And that is the walk across the Rhine River. So on the Loch Ness Monster side, there is a bridge just over the water. You go across it, and then you're in the area with France and Germany. And as you're walking along this, you can see the train bridge, and most impressively, Verbolten. Verbolten was in the plot of land where a ride called Big Bad Wolf used to be. And Big Bad Wolf had a very well-known and iconic drop right next to the water. Verbolten somewhat replicated this drop in a very similar style, and it is just incredible to look at. It's one of the most photogenic areas in the whole park, which is a very, very impressive bar. Beyond this, you can see Alpengeist Cobra Roll, you can see Griffon. It's just a really nice area. It's one simple place where you're walking through, but it gives some of the most impressive and breathtaking views in any theme park. This is a good time to discuss the general appearance of the park. Simply put, it's beautiful. The landscaping is amazing, some of the very best of any park I've ever been to. The Rhine River, which is actually Brewery Road Lake, goes through the park and adds a whole new level to the scenery. How many other parks have a body of water going through them? Not too many. So that adds a lot. The roller coasters, they're all gorgeous with excellent presentation. The way Alpengeist is right along the water, Loch Ness Monster, even Griffon, they all look great. Verbolten has the awesome drop I mentioned and goes into the woods. InvadR, even though it's kind of in the back, still is a very grand structure, spanning a pretty decent area that's very nice to see from the train. And the list goes on. I think the theming in most of the areas is fantastic. Some are a little more lackluster, like Festa Italia, but none of them are bad. They're all at least appealing, and some places such as San Marco in Italy, and Rhinefield in Germany, and Ireland, all look very impressive, with great architecture that seems like a very nice replication of what you can actually see in Europe. It really seals the overall cohesive theme. This is easily the most beautiful SeaWorld park, and a top 5 or maybe even top 3 most beautiful park in the US from what I've seen. So moving on to the next part of the day, DarKoaster was not open yet, so I can't talk about that one. I have actually been on the original Dark Castle, so that was a scary experience as a little kid. But DarKoaster, I'm sure it's a nice little addition to the park lineup, but I can't say anything else. The next ride we went to was Verbolten, but it broke down when we were in the queue. This was the one unfortunate issue outside of the closures that we experienced with operations. But the breakdown was not too long. We did end up getting on later. But before that, we got a pretzel from German Pretzels and Beer. And for those who do not know, Busch Gardens Tampa has Twisted Tail pretzels, my favorite theme park food. I think it's the one theme park food I have to pretty much get nearly every time I go. I've had dozens of those pretzels before. I think they're delicious. I think they're underrated, frankly. I would take them over any other theme park food I've ever had. And these were just as good. Mind you, the name of the restaurant is not nearly as catchy as Twisted Tail pretzels, but still good. The next ride we went on was not actually Verbolten, but rather Alpengeist. We went on that, and the first thing I noticed was the ski resort theme. And it makes sense, but it looks awesome. I love the bits of fake snow they have all around. It actually seals the immersion better than maybe any other area in the park. The ride itself is without a doubt the best thing I rode that day. As far as B&M inverts go, it's probably the third best, which is a very, very high bar. I'd only put it behind Montu and Banshee. The ride has one of the most intense Cobra rolls of any roller coaster, maybe the most. And some people say the second half dwindles. And while I guess most of it's not as intense as the first half, I find that the sort of near-miss elements as you're going near the ground, feet dangling not too far from the fake snow, it's a gorgeous, scenic part of the ride, but you still have a good sense of speed going through. So on top of being very visually appealing, you maintain a very strong sense of speed and forces the whole way through, as the best B&M inverts do. What separates this one from others such as Raptor or Afterburn that I think are not quite as good is the stats. This thing is nearly 200 feet tall, and you feel that with the inversions. They're so massive in scale, and that is partially why they have so much impact. I don't think anything on this is quite as good as Montu's Batwing or Banshee's Zero G roll, underrated by the way, but Alpengeist is definitely one of the best B&M roller coasters out there, and my favorite roller coaster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, even though I've not been on Pantheon or Griffon, so I can't say it's the best of all of them. While we were in that French area, we went over to InvadR, which had an odd operation issue. It was very short, so it didn't really bother too much, but there was a staff member who was going to take off a train, but I guess he wasn't authorized to do that, and I'm not sure why he was doing that, but oh well. I guess I will take this moment to discuss the operations. I think they were overall solid. SeaWorld parks are not exactly known for the best operations, but on the plus side, Alpengeist and Apollo's Chariot were incredible. The dispatches were super fast, the lines were never more than 5 minutes the whole day I was there, and that was great. The only issues were the reliability on Verbolten, and to an extent some slower dispatches on that one, and then the weird InvadR one. But all in all, they were good, and while I can only judge one visit, I think compared to the average of Busch Gardens Tampa's operations, these are probably a little better. InvadR itself took me by surprise. I thought it was, frankly, really underrated, and it's my third favorite coaster in the park besides Alpengeist and Apollo's Chariot. The main thing I noticed is that, like many GCIs, it keeps a relentless pace the whole way through. It's obviously not as fast as something like Gold Striker or Mystic Timbers, but I found that up to the very final brake run, you do not lose speed. There isn't a ton of airtime on it, I guess. You do get thrown a little bit, but it is a family wooden coaster, so it definitely gets the job done for what it's supposed to be. But I think the sense of speed and the first drop, frankly, kind of go beyond the family coaster mark. I still do recommend it for families. It's a very smooth wooden coaster, very accessible. But if you're a young thrill seeker looking for something really intense and awesome, but you maybe don't reach the height requirement for Alpengeist, this is definitely a solid substitute. The next ride we did was the Busch Gardens Railway. And I tend to love train rides in parks. They're calm, but provide beautiful views of new areas you may not be able to see. And I'll talk a little more about the train later. but we took it back over to the Scotland area, and from there, we walked into Ireland and we rode Finnegan's Flyer. Finnegan's Flyer is a very fun ride. I do love the Scream and Swing model. There's one at Busch Gardens Tampa now, and while I find that one to be more intense and fun, this one does have a perk of being over the water, so if you're sitting facing the right way, you will be looking straight down at the Rhine River while on the ride. That's awesome. The ride's location right next to the river additionally makes it a very photogenic Scream and Swing. I have to love that. It's definitely one of my favorite Scream and Swings because of that. And after this, we headed back to Verbolten, and this time it was open. Verbolten is interesting. I find that people thoroughly enjoy this one. Think it's one of the best launch coasters in America sometimes. I can't really agree. For me, it's a strong family coaster, but frankly much tamer than InvadR, which is a very uncommon take, but I didn't think there was a whole lot that really took me by surprise with forces. And the indoor section, this did really shock me when I saw that the budget was $50 million. The indoor section is very lightly themed, which is alright, it's not a huge issue, but what did they put the $50 million into? I don't know everything about coaster budgeting and all. I assume making the massive building must have been a big part of that. I think the launch into the indoor section is awesome, and the one sort of surprise element that I won't talk about too much for those who haven't been on the ride is very fun and well executed. But unfortunately, the parts between that, they're just kind of average indoor coaster fare. Not really as good as something like Runaway Mountain at Six Flags Over Texas that provides shockingly great drops. The outdoor section is actually a very nice way to end the ride. I love how you go up to that sort of watchtower and then dive next to the water. And it is without a doubt the most intense part of the ride. But all in all, this is probably 4th or 5th best at the park for me. In a way, it is very comparable to Cheetah Hunt, because both of them are kind of family coasters that a great amount of people think are some of the best in the park or the world, but I can't quite agree with that. Still, definitely worth riding, it's not bad. It just doesn't stand out quite as much as some other roller coasters out there, and I think maybe it's a bit overhyped. The next thing we did while we were in the Germany area was go to Festhaus for a meal. Festhaus was delicious. There was a great variety of different meats and sides, and it's a cafeteria setting like many of the Busch Gardens, SeaWorld, frankly theme park restaurants are. But my favorite part was the Black Forest cake. The only weird thing was that we got a total of 2 slices, and one of them definitely just did not have sugar in the icing. The one that did have sugar was amazing. The one without was okay. So there's really not an easy way to tell just looking at them. You just have to hope for the best. I think that was a minor mistake, not the kind of thing you normally have to worry about. But either way, Festhaus is a great theme park meal, on par with the best. The next ride that we did was the full circle for the train. The Busch Gardens Railway, I'll preface by saying, is my favorite railway of any park. Even against Dollywood's and Silver Dollar Cities, those are great. All these train rides have very different strengths, honestly. Dollywood's is nice for that authenticity with being coal-powered, and the views of the park are very unique. Silver Dollar City has alright views, but it's bigger for that great show it has. And then Busch Gardens Tampa, probably my second favorite, takes you through the Serengeti area, and you can see many animals. That's awesome. But this one, in terms of scenery, is simply unmatched. We did the train ride at sunset, and I don't think there's a single more picturesque shot I've gotten in any park than the sunset with the Rhine River and rides on both sides. It was just one of the most unbelievable views I've ever had, and I can vividly see it in my mind when I think about it more than maybe anything else. You go right along the park boundary, so you're at a forest, might see some deer, we saw deer, and deer are nice. So all in all, this is my favorite train ride in any theme park, and one of my favorite rides in the entire park. An absolute must-do experience, especially if you can get it at a really photogenic time of day. And once we got off, it was time for night rides. We got 3 night rides on my 3 favorite coasters, Apollo's Chariot, Alpengeist, and InvadR. The settings for these rides, especially the first 2, all make for absolutely phenomenal night rides. Going over the river and the forest for Apollo's Chariot made it the most improved of the night ride ones. Alpengeist feels a bit more intense, and InvadR, we were blinded by the camera so we could just not see what was going on for a bit, and that was really fun. There is one other thing I do need to discuss that I didn't get to yet, and that is the park's layouts. The layout's important because you want to be able to get around the park pretty easily, know what's where and all that, and this park is massive, but the layout is a very complete loop, with that path over the Rhine River in the middle, making some walks shorter. There's not a whole lot else on the layout. It is important to discuss. I would say it's very good. It's not as masterful as King's Island or Islands of Adventure, but it's still definitely not something that brings down the park. It helps just a little bit. All in all, Busch Gardens Williamsburg is one of the best parks in the US. I did not get to ride 2 of the biggest coasters there, including the almost unanimous number 1 in Pantheon. But with so many other great rides, themed areas, atmosphere, food, and everything else, I truly can say I didn't feel like I missed out. At most other parks, if I didn't get on the number 1 roller coaster, I would be pretty upset leaving that day. I'd be sad, not upset at the park or anything, but just upset in general, knowing that I missed out on something that might have made the park even better. But here, the park was already so great that even though Pantheon might have improved the day, I was not upset at all. I was only upset because I had to leave, because I would love to spend another day there. It's a rare feeling, but the park is just that good. I still do struggle to determine for sure which Busch Gardens park is better. I've had so many more experiences in Tampa, and I've been on the best rides there. That said, I am confident that the appearance is much stronger at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, and the operations are at least a little stronger. I can't say for sure Williamsburg is better due to the disadvantages, but I would say that outside of the roller coasters, Williamsburg is the supreme park. That said, coasters are important for me, so before I can make the definitive decision, I may have to get on Pantheon, but for now, take my word for it, I highly recommend a visit to this extraordinary park. It is one of the most beautiful and enjoyable theme parks in the nation, and possibly the entire world. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, comment down below your thoughts on the Busch Gardens parks, and subscribe for more theme park content. I'll see you next time.